Deep inside a quiet, dimly lit hotel room in Tehran in 1953, an American spy was staring at an urgent telegram from his headquarters in Washington. The message was a direct and final order. It told him to abort his mission immediately, pack his bags, and flee the country before he was captured. His cover was completely blown, and his life was in extreme danger. But the agent stood there, looking out the window at the dusty streets below, and made a decision that would alter human history. He ignored the direct order. He had heavy leather suitcases sitting next to his bed, and those suitcases were stuffed with $1 million in untraceable cash. He decided to go completely rogue. Instead of running for his life, he walked out into the chaotic streets and used that money to buy an entire country. He paid off corrupt journalists, he hired local mobsters, and he bribed military generals to roll heavy artillery tanks right through the capital city. This sounds like the fictional plot of a Hollywood action movie, but it is the completely declassified reality of Operation Ajax. It was the very first time the United States intelligence agency successfully overthrew a foreign democracy, all because the British government wanted to keep absolute control of the massive oil reserves buried deep under Iranian soil. So this is not a conspiracy theory about hidden shadow governments. It is the documented, step-by-step breakdown of how the CIA hijacked Iran. You are about to discover the exact dirty tactics they used to steal a nation, and you will learn the terrifying reason why that single rogue decision accidentally created the explosive Middle Eastern crisis we are all living through today. To truly grasp the massive scale of this historical heist, we have to look at who owned the wealth at the time. Back in the early 1950s, Britain practically owned the nation of Iran. A massive British corporation, which would later become BP, controlled every single drop of crude oil coming out of the Iranian ground. The British executives running the massive Abadan refinery were swimming in absolute luxury. They lived in massive mansions, drove beautiful cars, and made incredible fortunes off the land. Meanwhile, the local Iranian refinery workers who actually did the dangerous, back-breaking labor lived in terrible, disease-filled slums. They had no running water. They had no electricity. They were treated like second-class citizens in their very own homeland. Would you be happy if a massive foreign company took all the natural wealth from your land, kept all the profits, and left you with absolutely nothing? Of course not. The tension in the country was a ticking time bomb just waiting for a spark. The people of Iran finally decided they wanted their country back, so they held a democratic election and chose a man named Mohammad Mossadegh to be their new prime minister. Mossadegh was a highly educated, peaceful, and deeply beloved leader. He was so popular globally that Time magazine even named him their Man of the Year. His very first major action as leader was exactly what his starving people wanted. He legally kicked the British oil company out of the country and nationalized the oil fields. He wanted the massive profits to stay in Iran so they could build schools, roads, and hospitals for the Iranian citizens. The British government was absolutely furious. They felt like their property had been stolen. They responded immediately by surrounding the Iranian ports with massive warships, creating a total blockade. This completely destroyed the local Iranian economy because they could not sell their oil to anyone. But Britain wanted to go much further than a blockade. They wanted to invade the country and take the oil fields back by force. The only problem was that Britain was still recovering from the Second World War. They could not do it alone. They needed the massive military muscle of the United States. When the British asked the American president for help, he flatly refused. The United States did not want to get involved in a greedy, imperialistic fight over oil. So British intelligence came up with a dirty, brilliant trick. They knew the United States was completely terrified of the Soviet Union. Therefore, they fabricated a massive global lie. They told the American government that Prime Minister Mossadegh was secretly turning Iran into a communist state and that the Soviets were about to take over the entire Middle East. The United States swallowed the lie completely. The blind fear of communism was all it took to pull the trigger. The CIA authorized a highly classified top-secret mission to completely remove the democratic leader of Iran. They called it Operation Ajax. But getting a president to agree to a coup is only the beginning of the story. As you are about to see, the actual execution of Operation Ajax was a complete disaster. You need to pay close attention to how this first attempt spectacularly failed, because the desperate backup plan they were forced to use next is the exact reason the Middle East is currently on fire. The CIA sent their top agent, a man named Kermit Roosevelt, straight into Tehran. He was the grandson of a former American president, and he arrived with those briefcases full of cash. His initial plan was incredibly simple and straightforward. He wanted to use corrupt members of the Iranian military to arrest the prime minister in the middle of the night. After the arrest, the CIA would install a friendly, pro-Western king, known as the Shah, to take absolute power. But the midnight plan completely fell apart. Prime Minister Mossadegh was smart, and his loyal supporters found out about the secret plot. When the military coup leaders arrived at his house in the dead of night to arrest him, his heavily armed personal guards were waiting for them. The guards arrested the coup leaders instead. When the young Shah heard that the plan had failed, he was so terrified of being executed for treason that he literally abandoned his own country. He hopped into his private airplane and ran away to Rome. Operation Ajax was a massive, embarrassing failure. When CIA headquarters in Washington heard the news that their secret plot was exposed, they panicked completely. They sent an urgent telegram to Kermit Roosevelt, ordering him to abort the mission, destroy his documents, and get out of Iran before he was thrown in a dark prison cell. This is the exact moment world history changed forever. Kermit Roosevelt read the panicked telegram from Washington and made the ultimate choice. He decided to disobey his commanders. He stayed in Tehran. He looked at his remaining suitcases of cash and realized he could not use stealth anymore. He had to use absolute, terrifying chaos. Roosevelt stepped into the shadows of the city and started buying people. He handed out stacks of cash to local newspaper writers, paying them to print completely fake, terrifying stories about the prime minister. But fake news was not enough. He needed physical violence. He went into the criminal underworld and hired tough street thugs, local mobsters, and even massive Iranian weightlifters from the local gyms. He handed out thousands of dollars to these violent gangs and told them to pretend to be radical communist rebels. He ordered them to run through the streets, smash shop windows, burn buildings to the ground, and physically beat up religious leaders in public. He wanted the ordinary citizens of Iran to be absolutely terrified. He successfully manufactured a completely fake civil war just to make the public believe that their beloved government was collapsing into anarchy. The artificial chaos worked perfectly. The public panicked. The streets were filled with fire and violence, and normal people thought their country was tearing itself apart. Once the fear reached its peak, Roosevelt used even more American cash to bribe corrupt, high-ranking military commanders. Soon, heavy army tanks were rolling right through the streets of Tehran. The military surrounded the prime minister's house and bombarded it with heavy artillery fire. The battle was loud and destructive. To stop the endless bloodshed and save the lives of his innocent people, the beloved leader finally surrendered. Prime Minister Mossadegh was arrested, placed in solitary confinement, and forced to live under strict house arrest until the day he died. With the democratic leader completely removed, the CIA quickly sent a message to Rome. They brought the cowardly Shah back to Iran and placed him firmly on the golden throne. The heist was officially complete. For the next 25 years, the Shah ruled the nation of Iran as a brutal, wealthy dictator. He was fully backed by the West, and he created a terrifying secret police force that kidnapped, tortured, and crushed any citizen who dared to speak out against him. The British and the Americans got all their precious oil back, and for 2 decades, everything seemed perfectly fine for the Western world. But forcing a proud nation to bend to foreign greed always backfires in the end. The deep, burning resentment that the CIA planted in the hearts of the Iranian people back in 1953 never actually went away. It simply boiled under the surface for decades, growing hotter and more dangerous every single year. Finally, it exploded. This built-up anger led directly to the massive 1979 Islamic Revolution. The furious people of Iran rose up, overthrew the Shah, kicked out the Americans, and took their country back a second time. But this time, they did not create a peaceful democracy. They created a deeply anti-Western state. The extreme hostility, the threats, and the political hatred we see on the news today between Iran and the West was not born out of nowhere. It was completely manufactured by foreign spies carrying suitcases of cash. The people in power thought they could easily buy a country, overthrow a government, and control the future forever. But history has a very long memory. You cannot steal a nation's freedom and crush its people without eventually paying a devastating price. If this story helped you finally connect the dots behind the global conflicts you see on the news today, please hit that like button to support our work. Do not let these hidden truths stay buried. Share this video with a friend who needs to know the real history of the world, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. We are constantly pulling back the curtain on the dangerous secrets that shaped our reality, and I cannot wait to see you in the next story.